Hi guys, welcome to the 2x e-commerce podcast, and I'm your host Kunle Campbell. This is a podcast dedicated to rapid growth in online retail. So if you're looking to grow traffic, conversions, sales, ultimately revenue in general, this is the right show. Now, 2x is a lot of you have been talking to me about retention, marketing strategies, and a lot of the time we've really looked into your messaging. So we've looked at email, we've looked at SMS. We haven't really looked at metrics. What e-commerce retention metrics should you be looking at? I think the last time we talked about metrics about 3 years ago. And on today's show, I have with me someone who's really, into this stuff, who's in depth into retention metrics, who's into returns, quite interestingly, and has studied retention metrics in order to build a platform, a returns platform on Shopify called Loop Returns. Now, Joe is the product manager, he's product marketing manager at Loop Returns. And Loop Returns basically are an app on Shopify that essentially help streamline returns so returns can help work as a retention channel. I'm not going to go too deep into what Loop Returns does, but I'll first of all like to introduce Joe to the show. Welcome, Joe.
Thanks, Kunle, for having me on. Happy to be here.
Before we kick off today's show, I'd like to give a quick shout out to our sponsors. Did you know that cloud-hosted e-commerce platforms like Shopify and BigCommerce do not provide automatic backups? Rewind steps in to protect Shopify and BigCommerce stores with automatic backups. Rewind is trusted by over 25,000 stores. Install Rewind and get to test it for free over 7 days. And to extend the 7-day trial to 30 days, head over to rewind.io, their website, and mention 2x e-commerce. Fantastic. Could you take a minute or two to introduce yourself? Because I've probably not done you sufficient justice in the introduction.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm with Loop. Loop has been on Shopify for the last 3.5 years, and we're a small team in the Midwest in Columbus, Ohio. We were really fortunate to work with some key brands early on. Chubbies and Allbirds really have been our biggest advocates since the early days. And when I came into Loop, we had a small team of engineers. We had a CEO who was a friend of mine. And we were really just cutting our teeth on this return story. How does this fit into the bigger picture? I was fortunate enough to be called in by him one day, and I started just beating the pavement, talking to merchants, understanding what they need, what do returns look like today, what matters to you. And we use that to start to build our roadmap. What are the things that we should be building in that doesn't make returns just simply a refunds platform? And a lot of the requests were the same. I learned from a lot of brands that people are trying to unlock exchanges and they're trying to keep the relationship going. And the headline there was that a lot of brands saw a refund as a breakup. So that's been the most of my focus over the last 3 years, talking to brands, understanding what they need, where are they trying to use post-purchase and returns to drive retention and differentiate, and then get it built into a product that serves them. It's been a fun ride.
I like the statement. A lot of people viewing returns as a breakup. There's a lot to unpick from that, and in the sense that it raises a lot of questions. Why are they returning this item? Is it because there's a product quality issue?
Sure.
Was there a customer experience issue? What insights have you found as to have you looked into why returns occur? I know they're pretty obvious, but at an aggregated level, do you have any data around that?
Well, so where we're getting here is return reasons. So why are things coming back? Mm-hmm. The most important thing when looking at a return reason is to understand that every data point that you're getting doesn't mean they didn't love you as the brand. You see a return reason, you're like, damn, we lost them. But that's really not usually the case. When you're looking at return reasons, you're really looking for the trends that aren't, product was damaged or, I received the wrong product. Those are all really important. You have to share those with the manufacturing team and your product designers. But typically someone designing a retention program is in operations and they're driving the bottom line, or they're in customer experience and they're thinking of NPS. What you're looking for there are the alternatives to a refund. So what are the signals that you can get from this data that tell you that they wanted to keep going but couldn't? Do I just have the wrong size? That's a really obvious one. But maybe they bought a product and the shirt appeared more dull than it did in the photography. It doesn't mean they want to break up with you and move on to the next guy, and now you're back reacquiring a new customer in their place on Instagram, right? You need to look for those reasons that are coming through and telling you, I wish I could keep going, and how can I? And there are a few, and it's usually around look, it's around feel, and sizing is huge. So the data points are tough to get, admittedly. The biggest problem that merchants will run into early on, if they say, yes, I love this story, I want to invest in this, the problem you run into is having data that can be aggregated, that can be filtered and searched. The inclination will be to just start with a comment box, potentially on like a packing slip or some sort of open comments that tell me why it's coming back. For any brand that's at scale or planning for scale, that becomes really difficult to actually pull in the insights, because I might write too big, I might write too large, I might write didn't fit, and they all meant the same thing. Exactly.
Very, very interesting. I'd like us to jump into the entire returns process, but before we do that, let's talk about retention, a little bit. You said you've worked with Allbirds, Chubbies, and other best-in-class direct-to-consumer businesses. You've actually helped them, find solutions in their return processes. But what do brands at that scale and level look at? What metrics are they looking at on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on an annual basis, to gauge the health of their retention?
Well, so I think that any metrics that you want to look at, it's best to start with the basics and really dig deep. And I think that's, there are so many metrics that everyone throws around and they all have pretty names, but the best ones take the basics and they dig really deep. They want to create depth of understanding around very simple ideas and then build tactics to reinforce it. So a very obvious one, a return rate. Why are products coming back? So we've started digging into this, and you pull reports and what they're typically doing, and it'll vary from brand to brand, but regularly, usually I would recommend quarterly if you were going to get started on this. You're going to aggregate all of your return reasons data, and the first thing you do is distribute it across departments. So it's not just something that the CX team is using. Some of the other best, and gosh, I don't work with this brand, but we have met, and I wish they would come to Loop. They're using this data to actually inform acquisition. And this is where the crossover happens with the best brands. There are retention metrics, sure, but as you dig into all of your retention metrics, what you find is that all of your tactics that would improve a retention metric actually improve acquisition. And that's where you have this flywheel. So an example, someone looking at return reasons data. You realize that you have a fit issue. You realize that the majority, sometimes 40% of all of your returns are coming back because they didn't fit. Good American took this data and they hired a photographer. Actually, I think with BVXL, an awesome agency on Shopify. They hired a photographer and they decided that to address their fit issue, they were going to bring down their return rate. They were going to photograph all of their best-selling products in 3 different sizes. So they'd have effectively a petite, an average, and maybe like a curvy size model representing their products. The goal ultimately is to bring down the return rate. But what you find is that when you have more confidence while you're shopping, when you can see yourself in your products, you're also driving acquisition. And so that's a really advanced way of using return reasons data to actually change how you're acquiring customers and also bring that metric down.
Super, super interesting. So would you suggest categorizing return reasons? So, actually puts in a field, a drop-down field in your returns process to, to make sense of it.
Totally. Okay. Yeah, the easiest first step is to pre-populate your return reasons.
Okay.
Leaving it open to an open comment, there's just too much variability. You need to have some structure. And even if it's just didn't fit, didn't like it, damaged, that's a good start. It's better than an open comment box alone.
Okay. So that way you can actually visualize it. You could get a breakdown. Okay. So what other metrics should you look at? So obviously your return rates would be number of returns out of, number of orders on a quarterly basis, as you alluded to. Are there any other signals, any other, metrics in the returns space that we should, keep an eye on?
Yeah. So once you have, and this is why it's important to bring up first, however simple it is, once you have your return rate, you have a view into all of your products that are coming back. And that's just one layer to the story. You now see, if you're an apparel brand, you're likely seeing that you have this segment of your business, and it's likely anywhere from 20 to 40% of all of your revenue is moving through this new channel. And that would be defined by your return rate. And when you look at it that way, it becomes a much different story. It's not just your refunds channel. What you actually need to do is break out your return rate into multiple metrics. So to give you the easiest example and the easiest first step that you could take with your return rate is to break out a refund rate. It's going to be a bit challenging, but what you're trying to find is, of all of my returns, how many were actually just trying to walk away. Some brands, most brands that don't have either a data team supporting this or a solution that's tracking it for them, they'll likely see that all of their returns are refunds, but that's the most important thing to break down first. That's actually not true.
But okay, I have questions.
Sure.
So stepping back to the return rate, benchmarks, what kind of benchmark should we do best in class have from a return rate standpoint? 10%. I know it vary from vertical to vertical, but let's talk about apparel and footwear, for instance. Sure. What are best in class return rates? Apparel
and footwear brands are trying to break below 20%. That's the best in class target.
Monthly or quarterly?
Yeah, of any time period, of all revenue you're bringing in, how much is being returned. If 20%. You can get below 20%, you are in the best in class territory.
And refund rate.
Refund rate, now this is where it gets interesting. So the average refund rate, if you think of a percentage of all of your returns that should be asking for their money back, the industry average is right around 80%. So 80% of all of your returns are people that just want their money back. Now that's in this pre-era where you really don't have any. Yeah, and that's actually where you can focus your time, because the more of those customers that you've already paid to acquire on Instagram, you've already converted them on your website, you've spent a lot of money getting them to this point, and now you've got a bucket of them who are making a decision: do I stay or do I go? And that's the place to focus time. Now you need these metrics to understand if anything you're doing is working to improve it, but yeah, when you have 80% of all of your returns being refunded, that's where the battle's won.
And is there any way to study returning purchase rate from that cohort of returns?
Yes, actually, this is the best first step for someone trying to get down this path. Pull all of your return rate, which is great. It may be 100% refunds. That's fine.
Yeah.
But then look at the repurchase rate, and we'd recommend within 60 days.
60 days, yeah, that's a good cohort. Yeah, that's a good.
Everyone uses a 30-day window to say this is what my returns window is, but there's really no basis there. I think it's just a herd mentality.
Yeah.
If you look at someone who repurchases within 60 days, they were ready then. You didn't have a way to facilitate it.
Mm. Okay. So So I guess that those would be more fundamentals, like business fundamentals to benchmark anything around like the returning rate over 60 days. It'd be like, your product quality, how you're doing your marketing in general,
that's right,
your email flows and the like. Okay. So there's obviously a problem, massive leakage. If 80% of all returns, end up, you giving back, your money, you giving them back their money. I guess that is where you guys saw the problem. And so with Loop, what are we looking at? How much of that 80% do you get back?
So this is where verticals is very important, and also the design of your store. So I'll give you a generalized apparel example, but it's really important to think of who you are as a brand, what products you're selling, and how big your catalog is. So if, for example, you sell bras, we see this often where we have a new startup coming out with a line of bras and they have really 3 main fits in a number of different sizes. There's not as much shopping happening there as if you were a women's apparel company launching with dresses and pants and shirts. So there's opportunity in different areas depending on your vertical. But what I'll say when looking at refund rate and ways to improve it, the average is 80%, and brands will come to us and say, how do I bring this number down? Or now that I have visibility into it, how do I bring this number down? There are a number of tactics. I will tell you, just to lead off with the most important, it's incentives. Incentives are a word that just doesn't make it into the post-purchase or retention experience often enough. Most people are actually thinking of fees when they're talking about retention. How do I recoup some of this cost that's happening while I'm trying to facilitate a package going cross country? But when you go in with incentives, what you're saying is I'm investing in your relationship. So let me share with you what this means. I'm returning a $100 pair of jeans. They don't fit for me, and honestly, I don't even think I like the wash. I'm on the way to a refund. Now with Loop, you can enable this, but there are ways to do it without Loop, just being totally transparent. Whereas I'm on my path to a refund, I get offered 10% off if I choose to go back to the store, or a 10% discount code if I ask the customer service team for store credit. Those type of hooks are reinvestment in the customer. And that's what starts to drastically bring down your refund rate.
Sometimes you might be so pissed off with the product that the last thing you want is a discount. But on the flip side, if you're super excited about the product and it happened to be the wrong size or the wrong color, you just can't wait to return it, probably get your money back and purchase the right thing, the right fit. And if you're incentivized, I guess you'd be happy. You'd be a happier customer. Is that right?
Yeah, and actually, so you called out a good point at the beginning. When you got something that you really wanted and it doesn't work for you, you're pissed off. I think there's some cases where that's true, but I think the more important emotion that our brands are tapping into is disappointment. You aren't necessarily pissed. I mean, it's not like you're taking it personally, but you're just disappointed. You were waiting for 2 or 3 days for this to show up. You were excited. It gets here and you're like, damn, it just doesn't work for me. That's the first emotion that shows up in this process. And now if you then follow it up with a returns process that is equally as disappointing, it's likely more disappointing. That's when you have problems. So we're focusing on this disappointment, and then we're trying to delight them. And it's really a surprise. You come in and you think returns are going to suck. You think they're going to be expensive. You think they're going to be hard to complete because you're disappointed. You come into a process where instead you're offered an alternative. We tell you we're sorry. We know things don't work out. Our products aren't a great fit for everybody, but if you want to come back, here's 10% off. Or give them the discount code again. The funniest behavior that we see are brands that offer 15% off your very first purchase and then give them nothing if they want to return.
Before we kick off today's show, I'd like to give a quick shout out to our sponsors. Klaviyo is a growth marketing platform that powers over 25,000 online businesses. Klaviyo understands every single customer interaction and empowers brands to create more personalized marketing moments. Listen, analyze, and act on your customer data with Klaviyo. Visit klaviyo.com/2x.
All you're doing is wasting a discount and then paying again for all of these costs to ship and to process.
This is a lot. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Please.
It just sounds like a lot of customer service, overhead. Obviously it's a given in terms of like what you need to do from a customer service standpoint, but it sounds like a. Do you agree or?
It is. And it is. It's investing in relationships is tough. And honestly, I think the best way that we've been able to make sense of this is to really bring in dating parallels. When you're building a relationship with someone, it does take work and you've got bumps in the road and you need to keep reinvesting. To your point, to do that at scale with a multi-million-dollar brand is very expensive. You need to automate as often as possible.
Exactly.
And the metrics will give you visibility on what you need to automate first. But yes, you do need to automate, and there are a number of solutions out there that can help you do this, but it's a really important call out.
So my thoughts are that, Loop helps automate a lot of this. So I would get into an interface, I put in, I guess, an order number and maybe my email address or something, a unique identifier. Sure. Then you're able to pull out my order first things first. And then there's like a journey, like a wizard, like a wizzy thing where it's almost like a survey and you ask me questions. And so it's automated. I interact with a system essentially to manage my returns, with the goal from your end being that I probably exchange like for like for product. Is that the scenario there, or am I
You
missing something?
use that about sums it up. I think a great simplification of the process. You need a way to identify the customer in an automated fashion. Email is a great one. Order number, zip code. All of these are unique identifiers that you can use to say, okay, I know who you are. I know what you bought. Let's get started. And then you need to view an order. In the software, you pick a product you'd like to return, and then you choose an outcome. It's really that simple. Pick a product, pick a reason, pick an outcome. The outcomes can change. You know, you have size exchanges, shopping on the catalog, on the store, taking store credit, taking a refund. But just present these options to the customer, let them self-navigate, and you have visibility to all the data.
Okay. And I think the biggest win I've got from this is the fact that anything that then gets to the customer service in regards to returns is likely going to be very serious.
Yes, and you'd want it that way. There are certain scenarios that need to be high touch.
So it's a first line of defense for your customer service team.
That's right.
In regards to returns.
Yeah, and think about damages. I received a product that had a rip right through the center. You'd want to send that to a human. We're not here to automate all humans. Humans then need to pick up and build the relationship.
So does Loop pick up on like damage? So the moment you select one of the options there and it's severe, and you know this would not warrant an exchange, the person is not pleased, to say lightly, does that just stop it on its tracks, and then just put a human to human contact? What happens there?
So you would think that as a software company, you'd want that to happen. Give us as many customers incoming to Loop as we possibly can, because that benefits our business and all of this. But it's actually not the best experience for the customer. If I come in to what I believe is an automated system, and if I frequent Shopify, I've likely seen Loop before. So the moment I log in, I know what's coming. I log in and I get started on this process and I hit a wall. We don't want walls. And that's really a key piece of any retention program, is expectation setting. As long as you're setting expectations before any process begins. If you know that your clothes run small, just let them know that they run small. If you try to trick me, I'll bite you, because I'm going to return it and it's going to bog you down.
So lose.
Yeah, retention program is expectation setting. So, and it starts at the top. But to your point, you're coming into now a returns process and you're starting at the policy page. When we work with, and I'll give you a great example of who has done this the best, Brooklinen. Brooklinen.com, their returns and exchanges, their returns policy page is one of the best, and it sets expectations.
They're a bedding brand, for those who don't know Brooklinen.
Beautiful bedding brand. You get to their policy page, and the first thing you notice is it's about 2 paragraphs long. Okay. There's no legal jargon, and it's very basic. You have this amount of time, it's going to cost you this, and here's an expectation on how long it's going to take to get approved. Then you have 4 buttons. It's like a choose your own adventure return policy page. The first is I want to exchange, that takes you to Loop. The next is I want a refund, also takes you to Loop, but the illusion of choice. Then you receive the damaged product. That takes you straight to the customer service team.
Okay.
If you're an international customer, straight to the customer service team.
Okay.
You may end up in Loop, but it's really important that your first touch is a human as early as possible.
Okay, so you're essentially bridging that connection as early as possible, so it's escalated and they get the most important issues, queries coming through, important tickets essentially coming through. Okay, that makes a ton of sense. It makes a ton of sense. Okay, so in the world of returns, what are your predictions? In the next 12 months. How's it going to change? What's in the pipeline at Loop?
So there's a lot changing right now. I think my predictions have changed. Our company's predictions have changed given COVID.
Yeah.
there was already interesting behavior happening before COVID. And I'll give you an example in a very specific vertical. Swimwear had an influencer problem. Swimwear brands, more than any other brand, were more likely to buy multiple of swimsuits, try them all on, potentially take a photo. I'm not exactly sure what's happening, but brands believe they're buying them, taking photos, and returning them. So there's this wardrobing of a new kind. It's not like you're buying smalls, mediums, larges, and attempting to find what fits. You're buying it to try it on, to post some pictures, and get some social currency. And that's just a strange behavior that's always been in the back of my mind, that in this world of living more online and digitally and leaving the house less, how does shopping change? And so, I don't know if that'd be a very hot take to say that that's going to be behavior that changes in the next year, but home try-ons are going to continue to be huge. Is there and this is where the finance team needs to jump in. How do we build a model that makes sense to ship a certain amount of product up front so that someone can find their size and then let them not bog down our supply chain as much moving forward, as opposed to letting this kind of transient exchanging process continue all throughout the customer's life cycle? A really simple example in jewelry is ring sizers. Instead of just buying a ring and shipping it to you and shipping it back, I'll ship you a ring sizer first. How can you translate that to other verticals? Warby Parker does it well as well. I think home try-on will be big. Retail stores, are going to have a hard time, or at least have a recovery period.
It's the impact, as you said, it's the impact on finance. That's a major problem. The overheads of taking things out and in. As an acquisition, that has to be factored into CAC, I would think. Costs.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you need to keep it as low as possible. You need to cut costs. You need to identify all of the areas of cost first in the returns and post-purchase environment, and then begin cutting costs. There are the two main sources of lost cost in any returns or retention program is refunds and shipping fees.
What are your thoughts on free returns? Is it now a given, or are there exceptions? Do you see any exceptions on free returns?
Yeah, I do. This is the hottest debate inside our company.
Because that's friction, essentially for the swimwear stuff. I mean, it's disgusting, trying on a swimwear that's going to be used by somebody else. I don't know about you, but it's almost like wearing underwear. It's crazy.
Yes, that's right. And you can't allow it to happen and run rampant.
You should. I don't even think they should be allowed to be returned. You buy swimwear unless that's the unless they're going to exploit that unless if, but it shouldn't really be. It's almost like buying earrings. You don't return earrings. You buy them. You can't return them as the hygiene issues there. But but back to my question in regards to free returns. Should we have free returns or?
So in a world where all you offer are refunds, this becomes a really tricky problem for you, because you're trying to drive acquisition and retention. Your only outcome in the returns flow is a refund, and you're also trying to recoup costs. So you've pigeonholed me as a customer, which you can ask anyone if they enjoy having no options. The answer is no, and especially no options that cost me money. And so that's the first challenge. If you're only offering refunds during your return and you're trying to recoup the cost of shipping, you're going to have a retention problem. And you're going to have an acquisition problem, because I'm going to read my policy before I buy. There's data out there and it varies, but generally speaking, 50 to 60, depending on the report you read, 50 to 60% of customers are checking your policy before they buy.
That's insane.
And that's a really important metric too to dig into.
Yeah.
How many are actually doing that on your site? Because now it's a marketing asset, not to mention a retention asset. So to your point, free shipping, the best case scenario is you have your refund, which you must offer. You need to give someone an opportunity to get their money back. You need an alternative. The refund, in a best case scenario, has a shipping fee, and the alternative is free. Whether it be a store credit, an exchange, you've made a commitment to me as a brand by buying. You like the product generally because you converted. Continue doing that, and I will fund you all along the way. If at any point you want your money back, we will take a $6 shipping fee. But it's choice.
Yeah, and you just refund. It'll be a partial refund. Then, if you can give free return slips, but it could be a partial refund. They don't get their money back, their full money back.
That's right. And this is a fun story because we talk that there have been calls in the past where we jump on with a brand and they have all the intentions in the world of seeing a demo and understanding how it works and digging into the process. But we get on this question and we derail the entire call. It is so divisive. It really is. And you know, for us, when we sell returns, it becomes sport. But yeah, it's so divisive. And so where this goes, you have two strategies. And let's say you have the finance guy who is trying to recoup the cost of shipping. And you have a customer experience manager who's trying to drive retention and drive customer relationships. Where it gets fun is actually pulling in your conversion rate metric into this retention story. Because what you need to validate is, one, which shipping fee policy leads to more or less refunds. And that, you know, if you offer a shipping fee on refunds, you'll likely have more store credits. But are you pissing customers off? And that's where the conversion rate comes in. So
would that be through an A/B split test?
That'd be a great way to do it. If you are sophisticated enough to A/B test, absolutely. Because what you're trying to find out is based on the assumption that 2/3 or 50% of my customers are checking my return policy before they buy. And I'm trying to weave in a shipping fee. What's the impact on conversion? Because what you may find is that offering free returns lifts your conversion 0.5%. And if you're, you know, and if you have high AOV or just high volume, your lift on conversion may outweigh the cost that you're losing in shipping. And that's where the battle's won. And at that point, your head's spinning like, okay, I need to get this data. Where do I find this data? And it's a long road, but predictions for the future. Brands that do this well are the ones that will have higher LTV. And that's ultimate.
Yeah, you've raised a very interesting question in regards to how to filter out data. You know, so my thoughts just off the top of my head would be in analytics, you create a segment, you filter, you know, all conversions that have occurred that have visited that particular page, and then you make sure that they're first time purchases. You could probably do that also in Shopify by an API, I guess, API call. And you'd be able to get, you know, that unique conversion rate for that cohort. Yeah.
That's right.
And then for the A/B split test, would you say over a 60-day cohort or a quarter?
So vertical always matters here because there's seasonality throughout the year. If you're in a low season, you know, a lull, swimwear in winter, you know, you might have a safer environment to test and do it longer. So it really depends on what season you're in throughout the year.
And then you can run surveys too, you know, you can run surveys at the return. And then, the other thing you pointed out earlier was to look at your return cohort, just look at those group of people returned, and then just look at the repurchase rate. That right. is a very healthy metric I haven't even, you know, considered.
It's, man, so, you know, the saying, hindsight's 20/20. Everyone says this as if it's this like elusive thing that you can never attain. And if only you knew what you know now back then, things could be improved. That's all of your retention metrics. Your return rate, your return reasons data, how often people are refunding, like that's actually the view into the health of your business. And a really important, you know, statement, we use this as like a tagline in Loop, but it's not what people buy, it's what people keep. And when you look at it that way, you actually have a completely different view on your business and how you should operate. Because if you're only chasing acquisition, you have a revolving door on the backside that's actually hurting you.
It's a pretty immature thing to just look at acquisitions really, and must get caught up in that. Okay, all right. Yeah, great conversation. Joe, for people who want to find out more about Loop Returns, where do they go? Your website is loopreturns.com. Do you have any special, what's your price point? And do you have any special offers for listeners to the 2X eCommerce podcast?
We do. We have a program called Loop Lite. And what Loop Lite is a free, low barrier to entry way to just experience what Loop could do. And honestly, what returns platforms could do. You may not be a good fit for Loop, and that's fine, but it's really important to see what's out there. So yeah, anybody listening, please check out loopreturns.com and sign up for Loop Lite. It's free through the end of Q3. And it'll at least give you a taste of what's possible. And from there, you can start shopping.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joe, for coming on the show. Yeah, it was a pleasure and very insightful learning more about, returns and retention metrics within returns.
Thanks for having me, Kunle. This was great. Really appreciate the time.